Hey everyone, I'm John, and today we're talking about what I learned by reading 80 books in 2020. Learning to love reading is one of the things that took me a while to really adjust to. I've always been an avid reader in my life, but I didn't actually really enjoy reading until recently. Now, before we go too far, these are all nonfiction books. I don't read any fiction books. I will read biographies or things closer to fiction, but usually it's in the nonfiction category. Now, this year I learned a lot. Now, last year in comparison, I had a goal of reading one book a week. That's 52 books that year. I think I did 55 or so, but I learned a lot that year as well. This year, I had a lot more time, and also I developed a skill for reading, and I was able to complete more and more books. Some of my favorite things to read about are product development, history, personal development, and even like the software industry and where it's headed. But I also like to read things like biographies, finance books, and even like ancient warfare. Now, one thing I love about reading a good book is that you get to absorb all the information the author put into it. So if that author had a really successful career at a big company and they write a book about how you can do the same thing, you get to absorb all of their lessons and even their failures so that you don't make the mistakes in the future. Or you might have an author who learned to teach themselves, and this is how they make things stick. Regardless of what the topic is about, it's just the fact that you can do this in such a short amount of time. Like reading 80 books this year, if each book was about a couple years of writing, I absorbed over 160 years of knowledge in just a year alone. I think reading really helps open up your mind, and especially to the possibilities of things that you don't necessarily know is out there yet. Like if you're feeling stuck, you might read a personal development or a self-help book, which will help you get unstuck and get you going on the way that you want to be going. If you're doubting yourself or you feel like you have imposter syndrome, you might want to read a book about being relentless or even limitless. If you're trying to create a new product for the world to enjoy, you might just devour different product books, thinking in games, or just how to build things that actually matter. You may feel like your life is just a set of tons of failures, and you'll realize that in every single one of these books, there is failure somewhere. That's how we learn. You might be questioning what self-actualization is. How do you transcend to self-actualization? You may have a business idea and you don't know where to get started. Well, guess what? Other people have built businesses, successful ones, and they've written about them as well. You may not have strong boundaries in your life and you're feeling like you don't have that personal freedom. Well, there's even a book for that. Now, reading to me is how you sharpen your axe, and your brain is probably the most important muscle that you need to work out every single day. Your brain is how you make money, your brain is how you make good decisions, and your brain is how you actually do things. Getting an understanding of how you think and how you do and how you feel, it ultimately will make you a more rounded person. And that's what reading does. You'll realize that you're not a perfect person, but you can work on becoming a better version of yourself. You may question, how do you actually measure your life, and have these philosophical questions? You'll realize that nobody has the answer, but some people can tell you how they see it. You may feel that you don't actually have that reliability of a schedule every single morning. Well, there's tons of books about habits where you can learn. Now, one thing that I think is super important, and these things all mix with each other, is that you need to have habits that power you to do these things in the first place. If you don't have a habit of reading, you need to build the habit of reading, and you have to do this one page at a time. These small changes will change everything. Now, another thing I think is important is that reading helps you pick up patterns. Patterns in business, patterns in talking to people or communicating, patterns in your own thinking. This really helps you just kind of get a better idea of the world. Now, when you realize that these all have patterns, you'll start to notice that there are systems or ways that people approach problem solving of these patterns. Some people might communicate and they'll know how to get to a yes much quicker than others. Some people might even write checklists so that they make sure they don't miss a step. Some people may even tell you you need to unlearn everything that you were taught so that you can learn how to teach yourself. There's a lot of validity here. And if you want to be a more productive person, you can do that by buying a productivity book. I've tried a lot of things over the last year, especially things that I read about. A lot of things were actually successful, and a lot of things were actually big failures. I tried waking up at 5 a.m. every single morning. That stuck for maybe 3 months and then just kind of faded away. I tried meditating for 10 minutes every single day. That stuck for a couple months, and then that faded away. I tried writing 500 to 1,000 words every single day, and I could only stick to that to about 300 words. So that one kind of stuck, but at the same time, that whole goal was just too large. I started my own side businesses and started to realize what people actually want by validating them in the markets. I got my finances in order as well, and I'm not worrying about money as much as I used to in the past. And I've also made a ton of impact at work. Now, there's a lot of books out there, and we talked about so many different topics about what books can do for you. And I just want to say that there will be one book that will change your life forever. The problem though is getting to that book will be really challenging. First, you have to read for the sake of reading, and that is a challenge in itself if you weren't a reader beforehand. The second thing is that you have to find that material. Somebody might recommend you a book and they might have found it life-changing for them, but you need to be able to make the natural or the organic find yourself. And the last thing I think is that you have to build that system by building the habit first off. My simple rule is to read 30 minutes a day. 30 minutes in the morning or 30 minutes before you go to bed, that should really get you to build that reading habit as long as you do it every single day. I think you also need to curate a list of books that you're interested in. Curating that list of books will help you understand and prioritize what you should be reading. There will be different cycles of your life where you might need to worry a little bit more about self-improvement, or you might need to worry a little bit more about finance. Read them in the cycles that make most sense to you. There's a lot of great book lists that already exist out there. A lot of podcasts will also recommend books, but find places of trusted sources that you will actually read from. Now, you always have to be working on this list. You can't just set this list once and then forget about it. This has to be a living list. This list needs to change as your interests change. If you don't really care about finance anymore because you feel like that is covered, then start to deprioritize those finance books or just remove them altogether. You need to follow your curiosity in books. If there's one book that you really enjoy and the author doesn't have other works, you might want to look at what books inspired that book. There's usually references to other articles or other books, and that will help you get a good taste of what authors and ecosystem that author might have been reading. Now let's talk a little bit more about patterns just for a second, because I think patterns are really interesting because you'll see that there's maybe 1 to 5 books that are the top books in a category. And they are for good reason, because they have different concepts that really make them stand alone, and they're proven of time. You will soon realize that any new book actually contains majority of that material. Now, this is not to say that there are any unique messages out there. It's usually just that there are unique messengers. So for one person who talks about habits, you might not really like their content because they don't put it in a way that your mind speaks with. But then you read a different book and it doesn't necessarily talk about habits, but it might talk about like routines or systems or something like that. And all of a sudden, your whole world just lights up because that's the way that you think. So what I'm trying to say is that you kind of have to diversify yourself with regards to reading different material in certain genres. For the business category, for example, there's going to be a lot of people who are successful in their own terms, and there's also going to be people who are successful in the terms that you don't think is success. So we talked a lot about the benefits of reading, but I want to talk about how to read as well. The first tip that I have for you is that you need to have the medium that makes sense for you. If you really like to read on a digital format, buy something like a Kindle or an iPad or something with a specific reading app on it. Prefer a physical book? Then buy that. There are some other forms that I think you have to be aware about too. And I would say that audiobooks like Audible is a perfect substitute for most people as well. So let's talk about how to read. One thing that I like to do is I like to pair reading with some type of reward. In the morning, I'm going to read 30 minutes of a book before I'll have a coffee. When I go on a run, I will listen to an audiobook as my reward for doing the exercise. At night, when I read, I will usually read before I go to bed, and bed is kind of my reward. So try to pair your rewards as much as you can with the act of reading. And there's one thing that you have to be aware about. There's going to be really long texts and there's going to be shorter texts. For the really long text, try to do about 10 to 15 pages. That is usually enough in a reading session. For shorter books, you should try to strive for about 30 pages or 1 page per minute if possible. And for audiobooks, if you can bear it, try to increase the speed on your narration of your book. For example, I put mine to like maybe 1.5, and that helps me read a book just slightly faster because I still understand and comprehend it, but also it's not slow enough that it kind of drives me nuts. The last thing I want to say is that reading every single day is going to put you on a whole new level you didn't even think existed. You're going to become smarter, you're going to become better, you're going to know the patterns, you're going to just be able to be a force to be reckoned with. So if you have anything that you can take away from this video, is that you should make a conscious effort to read in 2021. You can get started today, but make it a conscious effort to make it a goal for your next year to read a certain amount of books. You have to force yourself to read the books before it gets enjoyable. That's just how most things are. I didn't enjoy reading until I read 12 books a year, 1 book per month. I really enjoyed reading as soon as I started to amplify the game, when I went to 52 books per year, which was 1 book per week. And this year I've read 25 more books than the year previous, 80 books. And I think this is just going to show that when you have a system and that you love to do something, this stuff comes naturally. And if there's anything else, is that if you need any book recommendations, I have them on my Notion. I also have them on my website, which you can check out. And if you like this content, feel free to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. But that will do it for me this week. I hope you all are having a safe holidays, and we'll see you all later. Take care.